Hello. Good afternoon. I think I'll wait for the presentation to transition. Great. Well, it is a pleasure to be here with you today and to share some insights from my 10 years of working with young entrepreneurs and to share a little bit about how Catapult approaches empowering young people to create change. I believe that young people have superpowers. I think that young people have superpowers to solve problems that adults cannot. I also believe that young people possess this ability to think about the world differently in a more creative way that is completely at times unbound by reality. And that is actually something that is amazing and special about them. And not only do we need to protect that, we actually need to start developing that more. And then unfortunately, in our culture where we expect so much from young people, they feel the pressures to be perfect, to be the best above all rest. It serves as this kryptonite that has a tendency to weaken this superpower. And that over time, they're left with very little. And I think if that happens, our society will be ill-equipped to handle some of the problems that face us. So at Catapult, we believe in empowering and equipping the inner entrepreneur and creative problem solver in these students. And we believe that when that is done, and when it's done well, that students like this that you see, just ordinary kids having a good time, can go on to create incredible things like this. This was built by an 18-year-old in Toronto, Canada, named Mohammed. This was fueled by a passion that he had when he found out that more people die in natural disasters because they can't get aid. And so for 2 years, he worked tirelessly, coming up with multiple prototypes. And then he ended with this one. It can carry a 25-kilo load up to 40 kilometers. And it's going on for doing some testing with the UN in Indonesia in the next 6 to 9 months. And so that's just one idea of one of the students that Catapult works with. And we think, at Catapult, what we're really trying to do is that we think that every student, every idea, every startup has the power to really change their world, the students, today and tomorrow. And that we work really hard to cultivate that curiosity that they have about the world and what they want to do, not only when they grow up, but right now. So I want to tell you a little bit about the backstory of how Catapult even got started. It's an interesting story. I was working with Ashoka. It's a global nonprofit that invests in social entrepreneurs. There's a lot of Ashoka fellows actually based here in India. And one of the things I was specifically doing as an entrepreneur in residence there was I was working with young people, helping them launch social ventures to help address micro-level needs in their community. But what I found was that 95% of these students actually stop right when the program's done, instead of going out and hopefully continuing with that idea. They usually implement it once, or maybe they just submit that plan. And now to provide some context, in the United States, there are other groups similar to Youth Venture, and they work with over 3 million students. And when we started to talk to those groups, it was the same story. Most of them stopped as soon as the program was done, and there were a few that tried to go out and start that venture, but they were floundering. They didn't have the support they needed to really take things to the next level. And so, with that in mind, this statistic became really real to me when my little brother was that statistic. He was in high school, trying to get a startup off the ground. This is actually him visiting me in New York. He was learning how to code his first website. And I was like, okay, I can finally answer this question I've been asking myself. I was like, what does it actually take to help high school students launch a company? And so with that motivation in mind, I started to think, where should I look? Where do adults go to launch companies? I started to look at different incubators such as Y Combinator, Techstars, Dream It Ventures, and I started to see, okay, what is the value proposition that those incubators provide to their participants? Could we provide the same thing for high school students? And it was interesting because I started to see the gaps right away. Now, for some context for those that maybe aren't as familiar with incubators, one of the value propositions is resources. When you come to an incubator, you have access to, not only do you get initial capital, but then you have access to new mentors and specialists to help you take things to the next level. For students, they don't have any of that. Often their teachers do not have an understanding of what business is outside of the theory. They don't have access to local entrepreneurs to serve as mentors typically. And last, there's a lot of great resources about how to start a business, but most of it's geared towards adults. You know, we have blogs and books and forums, and if students actually read all of them, they'd probably be a little apprehensive to take the next steps forward. So that's one thing. The next thing is validation. So when you get into an incubator, it's the first time you're like, oh, maybe I actually have potential here. Someone else outside of myself has told me this could be a legitimate idea. And that kind of a support simply is not there culturally, at least in the United States, for young people. Often these students go through these programs, they get a pat on the back, great job, we're proud of you, but we don't actually think you can do anything with that. And one of the reasons I think people are so amazed by Mohammed's story and his ability to build that drone is that no one actually thought a high schooler could do such a feat. And that's one of the stigmas we're trying to change at Catapult, is the power that young people do have. And the last component, which I actually think is the most important, is community. Now, when you get into an incubator, you have people to share the ups and downs, the good time and the bad. You have people that can test your new prototypes and ultimately work with you to make things happen. It's a great, energetic environment. With young people, often they are the only ones working on their idea, and at their school, they're probably the only one going against the grain, not trying to pad their college or university application resume. And so here they are alone, no one to work with, no one to relate to, and it's a really struggling time. So taking these three things in, what would it look like if we provided the right resources to young people, if we gave them validation and told them that they could actually do this? And then most importantly, gave them a community of other people. And so that's what I went forth to kind of create the Catapult ecosystem is what we call. And we start with what I like to call is creating the tribe. Other like-minded students from across the country so they can relate. And at the end of our program at Catapult, 3 months, we have a time for the kids to actually share out and say goodbye to some of the other students. And some of the most powerful messages that go out there is, before coming to Catapult, I felt really alone. No one could really relate to me why I was doing what I was trying to do. But here I really found my tribe. I felt like I belonged. And that's where we really saw the power of, community and what it can really do and how it can benefit people with launching a startup. The second part of our ecosystem is our mentors. So we've been very fortunate to work with some of the leading companies and universities to not only provide the human capital that students need, but also the space. And so our students get to travel the country experiencing different ecosystems, and these mentors get to shepherd them throughout the process. It's really the bloodline of our program. And the interesting thing is, after the advisors and mentors leave our program, they always kind of say, man, if only that was around when I was a kid, how much that would have changed my life. And I always think, hey, you're the one doing really good. So what could that potential even be if you would have had this when you were a kid? The next component is specialists. So we provide free legal help to all of our teams to help them get free of the red tape. We also give them free branding to help their ideas be taken a little bit more seriously with potential customers. And lastly, in our ecosystem is parents. That's right, parents. We actually lock them in a room for the entire day and teach them about what their students are going through. And it's actually quite amazing, the transformation that happens from a parent perspective. And they start to think about, what does it look like to actually support my child to go down what they think is a very unconventional, untraditional route. So we equip them with a community of other parents and some insights into how to approach that. So, back to the Catapult journey and how this all came to be. So once this ecosystem was in place, I called my colleague at the Harvard Innovation Lab, and I pitched her on this idea. I'm like, what about an incubator, but for high school kids? There's a long pause. She's like, sure, let's test that out. And after about 6 months, it was confirmed. 9 months later, we had 33 students from 19 states and 3 countries represented, working on 8 startups. We leveraged mentors from Harvard Business School, Google, and McKinsey, and we were ready to go. We implemented the program, had a lot of fun, learned a lot of things, made a lot of mistakes, and I think it's clear I want to share 2 outcomes of this first program. My goals were, 1, I wanted to actually see if it was possible to help high school students launch companies. The second was I wanted to hang out with my little brother. So one of those objectives was a little bit easier to meet than the other. I had to wait about, we waited about 6 months before we reached back out. I wanted to see, were the statistics going to be different from these big group programs that simply work on, hey, let's introduce them about some concepts. So I'm like, no, we just spent, 3 to 4 months, very intensive, like it's totally going to be different. And the results came in, and only 1 student out of the 8 had still been working on their venture. This is Henry. Henry had an incredible idea of doing what we call a 1-for-1 model. So you buy one and you could give one or donate one. And he was actually able to raise over $8,500 in 6 weeks doing pre-orders on a product that hadn't even been created yet, simply to test if people would be interested. So when you purchase a vitamin subscription for the same price, he actually donates 10 meals to starving children. And so this is a great story. It was, glad that we had 1 of the 8, but I was still pretty disappointed. I knew we could do more. And then about a year later, some interesting things started to happen. Our alumni started to reach out more and more, saying, hey, we're starting up our second company. Could you help us do this? Could you help with this introduction? And we're like, oh, and then another one a couple weeks later. And that's where we started to really look at the data. And we actually did our first ever alumni census. And I'd like to share some of those numbers because it had a profound impact on how we viewed our model and this vision of, okay, we need to launch. Can we launch these high school students? So looking at the numbers, we've done 10 cohorts, or at that time we did 9. We've done 60 startups. Of those 60 startups, 15% have actually still going on. Of all of the Catapult alumni, when you look at them, whether they kept going with the same venture or started something new, they've generated over $3 million to date. And our oldest alumni is 21 years old. Now, the statistic that I actually love the most is that 70% of them have gone on to start their second company. 70%. That's incredible. And so this is actually the big aha moment. This was when we're like, whoa, maybe we're onto something. Maybe we've actually been focused on the wrong thing. Maybe it's not just about launching successful entrepreneurs or successful startups, but launching successful entrepreneurs. Sorry, the font's a little off on this, so it got cut off. But so focusing on launching successful entrepreneurs was a huge mind shift. All of a sudden, instead of thinking, okay, how can we start this? It's about the company, it's about the company, it's about the company. All of a sudden, it's actually about the student. And how do we develop them as leaders? And so our journey's been quite unique. Thank you. Over the past couple of years, we've since spun out of Ashoka. We've shifted our message and our focus of launching successful startups to launching and trying to find and support the world's most promising young entrepreneurs. And we do find them, we try to equip them with an entrepreneurial mindset. And that entrepreneurial mindset is focused on empathy as the root. Empathy is the most important thing. That first weekend, we spend a lot of time talking about how to relate to other people, how to listen, how that's going to help them find the root problem that they're trying to solve. From there, we talk about how do you work collaboratively in teams? How do you work with different people of different backgrounds? And then experimenting, the importance of trying new things. The iteration effect of taking what you've learned and trying it a different way, and then a different way, and a different way. And then ultimately failure. How do we take failure and use that as a very valuable lesson that we can draw insights? And so once the students kind of think of it in this way, we've learned a lot of different ways that students approach that second startup differently. And so having this entrepreneurial mindset is one of the key things that we focus on helping students. And we tell them right away, even if you don't go and start a startup, you can use this at another company. You can use this in your family. You can use this solving problems everywhere. And so that's been really fruitful, and I'd love to actually share a couple of those stories of our alumni. So I'd love to introduce you to Joyce. At 14 years old, she started bedazzling the back of phone cases for her friends, and then that shifted into other cool trends, and she was like appealing to teenage girls that wanted a California chic style. Joyce is now 17 years old. Her store, Shop Wild Daisy, it has made over $500,000 last year. And she has over 125,000 followers on Instagram of other teenage girls trying to see what the new trends are. And so it's pretty exciting to see what Joyce has been able to do with this passion that started kind of on accident and has grown into a great thing. The next person I'd like you to meet is Mukund. So Mukund was passionate actually because his grandfather, who lives here in India, had poor hearing. And he didn't want to spend the money to go to an audiologist or to get the hearing aid later. And so for 3 years, Mukund worked tirelessly trying to create this. It's the first ever hearing test and hearing aid in the same device. And the most important thing is you can get it for under $100. And so Mukund has been working hard, starting to get the fruits of his labor, and he's hoping to actually build the working prototype for some distribution in the next 6 to 9 months. And so those are just a couple of the students, and now with our model that we've had 3 years to really figure out, we're looking to scale. And a big part of scaling is partnering with companies, governments, schools, universities. And I'd love to give an example of how can we potentially harness this power that young people have, this creativity and this view in which they view the world differently. I'd love to use an example from a partner of ours called Tools for Schools. Tools for Schools a few years ago worked with Staples, a company in the United States that sells office supplies. And the goal was to work with children in New York City to see what kind of products they might want to buy. So after a few months of walking these students through what we call the design thinking process, they were able to create some prototypes. So Tools for Schools, said, all right, Staples, here we go. Which ones would you want to make? And they actually did. Now Staples was really, really smart. They realized that the best people to help them design products for young people are young people. Isn't that such a novel idea? And sometimes students just need a little bit of guidance. And so that's one great example that I'd like to share. One of the approaches that Catapult is taking now is we fully understand that this is a long-term approach, similar to the Orbis Foundation. And one of the things that we really look at when working with these students is what we can do to support them, as they grow up and want to be alumni. I'd love to share a little bit about, more in depth of our incubator program, but some of the fun things that we're looking to explore in the future to help us in our scaling program. So our incubator programs takes place over 3 months. Students kick things off in Chicago. They're there the first weekend. We have something called founders and free agents. So 70% of our founders, the kids with the actual idea, they don't have a team. And so we actually have free agents that join the team throughout the 3 months. So that first weekend, everyone's getting acquainted, getting to know each other. And then they go out into the streets to actually figure out, okay, is the problem we're trying to solve a problem for other people? So we really focus on that empathy. That second weekend, they go to Silicon Valley, and that's where they actually continue to build out what is that initial prototype. Between weekend 2 and 3, they then try to get traction or great feedback from users to see if they're going in the right direction. Then they come to New York City, where they pitch to different venture capitalists and angel investors, not necessarily to write a check, which is important to note, but to see if the audience and the judges might be able to help them figure out what does the next 3 to 4 months look like. We don't ask our students initially to even worry about how they're going to make money. It's not necessarily important in the first phases. What's important is that they're truly solving a problem. And then we build on top of that. So that's the incubator structure. But as we look to scale, we recognize that the incubator, a 3-month program, can be a little daunting for some students. And another thing we found is most high school students don't self-identify as entrepreneurs or innovators, problem solvers. And so we're going to be launching a suite of products that we can engage with students for 1 hour, 1 day, and 1 weekend. And the goal of this, the whole goal, is to try to find the top talent that exists out there. And when I say top talent, I don't mean GPA. You can't, or what the grade point average is for a student. We don't even ask that on our applications. What I mean by that is, what is their deductive reasoning skills? How likely are they to take risks? And so we're looking forward to that. So that's on one end of the spectrum. And on the other end of the spectrum, we're looking to support our alumni. Now, one of our alumni, Micah, created this. He dropped out of Cornell about a year ago to create a robotic vacuum. Some of you even maybe have a robotic vacuum at home. But what the difference is this is the supercomputer version. This can run 365 days a year, 10 hours a day, and help hotel rooms really clean things faster. And that person, Micah, is one of the leading alumni that we're working with. And it was incredible when he's like, whoa, he's going to raise a multi-million-dollar seed round at a valuation in the 8 figures. And I'm thinking, we are totally missing out on this. We need to be doing something about that. So exciting thing that I'd like to announce is we're actually raising our first seed round investment fund for our alumni and only our alumni. And our investment philosophy is that if we actually truly know the character of our students, their integrity, their intelligence, how hard they work, how they overcome obstacles, can they break through, that we'll be able to better make investment decisions than most venture capital firms make in a matter of minutes. We'll have a matter of months and years to know the true character of our students. And so on both ends of the spectrum, we're looking forward to releasing new products and visions for really investing and supporting young entrepreneurs. So as I leave you, I wanted to share something I do with our students at the very beginning. Is I ask our students, okay, so why are you here? Why did you come today? And so I thought I'd share my why with you. I fundamentally believe that business leaders, innovators, and entrepreneurs have the power to change the world like very few other professions. And I think young people can be at the heart of that change. And I think it does take time to develop them. But if we develop and we start young, we can teach them to do incredible things. And more importantly, be ready for that moment when they do have to solve problems. And we're living in the world is changing really, really fast. The World Economic Forum expects that by 2020, 7 million jobs are going to be replaced due to automation. 1/3 of the college graduates in the United States actually use their degree. And the last stat is that 40%, they're expecting that by the time these students actually graduate from university, 40% of the job market does not even exist. So it kind of shows that you need to have an entrepreneurial mindset to solve some of these problems. And I think that's really what we're trying to work with our students, is to show them there's a different path out there and that you can really work to develop these skills, and it will help you regardless of where you end up. And as I leave, I think the students are really going to be inheriting a lot of problems, but a lot of exciting things. They're going to be responsible for figuring out how do self-driving cars actually work. How are we going to deliver packages via drones? How are we going to use virtual reality to increase empathy? And this generation is actually going to be the one that is figuring out how to colonize Mars. Something that if you would have told me 10 years ago, I would have thought you were crazy. So if you're a student in the audience, I want to encourage you to start now. Start now. The world, the world never changed by people that waited. And I think on that note, I'd like to just briefly share that we're going to be taking these skills and this mindset and this kind of structure of an ecosystem support and working with the Young Inspirers Network and Delivering Change to launch that here in India. And we're really excited. So if you're a business person or someone that would want to mentor these students, please be in touch. If you're a student and want to get involved, please be in touch. Thank you so much for your time today, and I look forward to talking to you in the breakout.